Excellent. Thank you. Good morning, everyone. I'd like to call the Budget and Public Employees Committee meeting to order. Madam Clerk, would you please call the roll?
Alderman Boyd. Alderman Hoover.
Present.
Alderwoman Schweitzer.
Present.
Alderwoman Sunday.
Present.
Alderman Alter.
Present.
Chair Spencer.
Present.
Alderwoman Boyd. We have 5 present, we have 4.
Thank you, Madam Clerk. Good morning, everyone. Thank you for being here today. As you know, we are conducting 2 public hearings on our city's budget. This is the second of 2, and so we're grateful that you all came here this morning to share some of your thoughts with us about our city's budget. Just to give you kind of the lay of the land here, if you did want to speak, we're giving 3 minutes to each speaker. We're asking that everyone sign up in advance so we have a list to go from. We're going to start off this morning with a short presentation from our budget director. And with that, I'd like to turn it over to Mr. Paul Payne.
Thank you, Madam Chair and members of the committee. For the record, budget directors usually don't get that kind of reception.
Could you say how long you've been on the job?
Yes, I've been with the budget division for 35 years and 16 as director.
Wow. And Mr. Payne, if you don't mind explaining kind of whom you answer and the structure of our city government.
Sure. The budget division, the budget director report to the Board of Estimate and Apportionment, which is comprised of the mayor, the president of the Board of Aldermen, and the comptroller. So technically, we've got 3 bosses. And so the process about the budget is that we're trying to make sure that the priorities of the elected officials are represented within that document. Just to give you an idea about what the process is we present, the Board of E&A recommends a budget to the Board of Aldermen under the charter 60 days prior to the start of the fiscal year. And that would be May 1st or thereabouts, because the fiscal year runs from July 1st to June 30th. Now, the Board of Aldermen can reduce items in the budget, but in order to increase, they have to go back to the Board of E&A. And so there's usually a little bit of compromising in that process in order to get a budget. But under the charter also, we have default mechanisms in place such that regardless, one way or the other, we will have a budget by July 1. So this process, as you hear today, is the Budget Committee and the Board of Aldermen reviewing it on the Board of Aldermen's behalf. They will consider any amendments, which will go back to the Board of E&A if there are some in June, so that by the end of the month that we will have a budget. So that's the process, and that's why we're here today. Right, and what I'm going to do is, this is a presentation I made both to the Board of Aldermen and Board of Alderman Committee here, and as well as the Board of E&A, and so it's right along, and I'm just going to go briefly through some of the highlights so you don't have to endure me, and we can listen to your comments after that. Right, the total budget for the fiscal 2024 is proposed at $1.3 billion. And you can see from the illustration before you the various fund categories. The general fund, which is the main operating fund, is $568.8 million. That's about 43% of the total. I should mention, if you take out, and you can see the fund categories, but if you take out enterprise funds, which is water and airport, they run like businesses, so they have their own sources of revenue. And in internal service funds are funds that are charged among departments. So those aren't tax dollars. Those are like gasoline, inter-service fund, and health insurance for the employees and such. If you take those other 2 later categories out, you're looking at about a $900 million budget from those sets. Now, this is not all city taxes. This is the city's budget. So there are other entities within the city that receive tax dollars, for instance, the largest portion of which would be like the school board. The city itself only gets 20% of your property tax, but there are other entities such as the school board, the library, there are certain assessments for senior services, youth services, mental health board. Those are separate entities, and so they get separate sources. So what we're talking about here today is the city government's allocations of revenues. Through the current fiscal year, and I'll go through these briefly, revenues are actually outpacing estimates. So the earnings tax, payroll tax, some of our bigger sources of funds. But we have you may be hearing about talks about potential recession going forward. So what you're going to see is that while we are exceeding estimates this year, we're not anticipating any growth in many of these major revenue sources for next year. You can see sales tax, that was up 10.5% over, historically it's up less than 2% per year. So we expect that most of that was driven by inflation. And as inflation cools and perhaps the economy cools as well, we're again only expecting about a 1% growth rate for the coming fiscal year. And restaurant and hotels, similarly, they've seen some significant increases. They were the hardest hit during the pandemic, and we've seen them recover to pandemic levels. And so we do expect the growth rate to in the coming fiscal year. So on this chart, you just shows the general fund revenue estimates as well as the special fund revenue estimates. And you can see the third quarter revised estimate is higher than the original budget estimate. But you can also see in the FY24 for next year, that is either slightly less in terms of the general fund or just about equal to the current fiscal year's revenue estimate, revised estimates. And this is just this next slide is just a summation of the increases and decreases from the general fund over the current fiscal year, starting with this year's budget, which was $540 million. We have a revenue tracking of about $567 for next year. The biggest increases you're going to see in this, which you may have heard about, are pay and benefit increases. Specifically, you have a 8 to 13% increase for police and firefighters, 3% increase for non-uniform employees, and then we also have some of our pension increases. That was nearly $25 million. So you can see that a large portion of the increases this coming fiscal year are related to pay and benefits. Pay and benefits in general represent about 70% of our total budget. Some of the other miscellaneous increases you see, like for instance in the comptroller's office up $2.5 million, most of that is related to insurance premiums on some of the city's buildings, as we've had some losses in the last few years, and we've seen an increase in premiums. Let's pull out some of the large ones. Non-departmental citywide accounts had a $5 million item in there last year for one-time payment adjustments, and that goes away in '24. Let's see, election board's down because that's an off election year. Next year there are no scheduled elections. The biggest item in streets, you're going to hear a lot about, and you've already heard a lot about, an increase in the total cost of refuse disposal. Between the general fund and the use tax fund, that's about a $3.6 million increase, significantly higher. A lot of that's being driven by our cost of disposal of recycling. A number of years ago, it used to actually generate revenue, and then it became still not as expensive as regular waste, but it was. But now, this year, it's actually cost us more to dispose of the recycling waste than regular waste, and next year is anticipated to go even higher. So there's going to be some review of that to see where the best way to address that issue, but it's going to be a big increase in cost next fiscal year. In the Department of Public Safety, you can see that the bigger item there, Office of Violence Prevention, that was $2.5 million. That's a consolidation of some services that were allocated to various departments in the current fiscal year, but this will be the first full year of that office on its own in the Department of Public Safety. Department of Corrections, they are underspending based on their staffing levels, so that we have some salary savings there. And then we have some increased costs. That supportive reentry program, again, on the Director of Health, that was moved into the Office of Violence Prevention. That's why you see that negative number there. And under the Board of Public Service, Facilities Management and Equipment Services Division, that's ESD, is the cost of maintaining our city's fleet and our building costs. So that basically is $27 million increased cost for general fund, and it gives you the $567 or $566.8 million general fund budget. And you see here's our revenue estimates for the current coming fiscal year. As I mentioned, we've got actually earning and payroll tax, some of our two largest sources have actually got it declines. Again, this anticipates an economic slowdown probably hitting us the final quarter of the current calendar year, and then some modest increases in some of the other accounts, particularly sales and property taxes. That increase in other category, that's in the hotel and restaurant taxes, which outperformed this year, and so we do have some funds there that are going to be released to the general fund. And again, I won't go over this in detail. I already sort of highlighted some of the big changes in various departments. Finance, that was the insurance cost. You can see the public safety is increasing because of mostly the pay increase, as well as the Office of Violence Prevention. And that decrease in health and human services is the move of the reentry program into the public safety department. Some of our other highlights in non-general fund categories, local use tax fund. It includes some allocated funds per ordinance, the biggest one being affordable housing. It's receiving an allocation of $6.5 million in use tax monies for next year. Plus, they had some repayments this year from previous loans, which provides them a budget of $7.2 million. You can see some of the other allocations there. The Healthcare Trust Fund remains at 5, and the Building Demolition at 3, and all other funds are highlighted at below that. The Economic Development Sales Tax Trust Fund, that was a half-cent sales tax for economic development. It's also allocated by ordinance. Those percentages you see are specified in the ordinance which set that up. The largest is 60% for transit. That 60% transit fund, that's for the expansion of transit within the city of St. Louis, has been accumulating since then, since fiscal 2017, and is expected to reach about $68 million in the current fiscal year, and with an estimate of $14 million next fiscal year, should reach close to about $82 million next year. And you can see the various other allocations: neighborhood stabilization, workforce development, public safety infrastructure, and just city infrastructure, which is the capital fund, all receive about a 10% share of those funds. The half-cent public safety sales tax, known as Prop P, has two components. The sales tax piece, which was a half cent, was, again, allocated by ordinance, those percentages you see. 66% of that goes to the police department, 28% to the fire department, and 6% to the circuit attorney's office. But in addition to that, with the increase in the sales tax, the use tax also goes up. And when that was proposed at that time, those subsequent percentages you see were allocated by the ordinance as well for various special programs, including 25% to the after-school programs, another 7.7% to the circuit attorney's office, 25% to recreation programs, 17.3% to building demolition, and 25% for social work and mental health programs. And those are allocated according to that ordinance. And the capital budget, $42.2 million, is actually up this coming fiscal year, both because of the increase in the sales tax we've seen this year, as well as an increase in the gasoline tax. If you recall, the state of Missouri is going through a series of graduated increases of about 2.5 cents per year for a 5-year period, and the city benefits from that because the gas tax goes to our capital fund. And so we're seeing an increase there. We did take a hit this year on the allocation of those taxes because it's based on census, and our census as a proportion of the total state population declines, so they usually do that after every census takes place. But going on for the next 3 years, we should continue to see increases related to that graduated schedule from the state gas tax. This is just an illustration of personnel changes. Not a significant number this year. General fund's up by 28, but the overall totals were up by 2. And you can see those illustrations. And then this is a 10-year picture of that, down about 72 positions overall over the last 10 years. Pension costs, this is one thing I always point to. It's related to one of our larger items related to pay. Those have been easing up and going up in the last few years. And so as the market declines, and you see that, that hits us. Actually, it's a double-edged sword when you have, anytime you have an economic downturn. Not only are your revenues going down, but because of the market performance, your pensions are also losing money. So your revenues are going down, but your contributions need to go up. And so that's something that we need to prepare for. So anytime we talk about pay and benefits, I always mention, well, we ought to keep in mind that there's, down the road, there's pension costs associated with all pay discussions. So that's something to keep in mind. And here's another illustration. The city has 4 pension funds, and this illustrates what some of the valuation numbers are. The big takeaway from this slide is if you look at, there's an actuarial basis, which is a calculated number by the actuaries, and then there's a market basis. And the market basis, typically you like to see at least 80% funded as normal. And typically, and the city has been pretty well funded in most recent years. The challenge is keeping the costs being so high and keeping them at that funded rate. But you can see on a market basis, those rates are beginning to decline. So that means the market has took some hits last year, and it's going to, so we're going to be seeing some increases over the next several years. One positive point that I'd like to, one positive development I'd like to point out here is our unreserved general fund balances. We have been successful in increasing these over the last several years, both through the fact that we've had in the last few years some operating surpluses, which by ordinance, 1/2 of which go to the capital fund, and which is a good thing because it's one-time source, so it's one-time use. But the other use of surpluses, however, goes to our general fund balance. And the rating agencies, if you're familiar with them, they often look at cities and say, hey, for a city the size of St. Louis, our reserves were somewhat inadequate for a long time. And they recommend that you have at least 2 months of general fund expenditures, or 16.6% of the budget. Well, this year was the first year we actually met and exceeded that total. So that was a very important milestone to meet. We do expect that to continue for FY24 with a somewhat modest surplus this year. And so, and then we also have a mechanism to where if we ever fall short of that, we budget and make sure that we maintain that as the new minimum in our approach. And this was one of the things cited. We just got recently, a couple of weeks ago, upgraded by Fitch, and they cited this improvement in our reserve status as one of the reasons. So finally, $1.32 billion budget, of which general fund is $566.8 million, and those highlights include $25.4 million to address pay and benefit increases, separate from about another $8 million for natural increases in pension costs. I didn't mention the fact that this, in the economic development sales tax, we also allocated $3.9 million to SEMA to replace the emergency warning siren system that had been needing to be repaired, so that's also in this budget. $3.6 million increase for projected costs of waste disposal, $2.6 million for the Office of Violence Prevention in total, increase in rising insurance premiums and such, and you can just read down that list. Capital budget's $42.2 million. That's an increase of 4.9 over the previous fiscal year. The budget's balanced, although we do expect some economic uncertainty. There's no crystal ball that tells us how bad or good that might be, but we do try to project revenues such that we are prepared in any event. And then there are other revenues that we've not incorporated in this, ARPA interest monies, marijuana sales taxes, which will start showing up probably sometime in December, and we'll get a handle on those when they come in. And that's basically it. That concludes the presentation today. Not necessary. Thank you.
Are you blushing? Okay, before we go into the public comments section, as we did in the other public hearing, can anybody hear me? Before we go into the public comment section of the meeting, as we did in our other public hearing for the budget, I'll open it up for a few questions from any members of the public for the budget director, if you don't mind obliging Mr. Payne. Does anybody have any questions about the presentation before we go into comments? I think you were the first to raise your hand.
Good morning.
Morning.
My question is about it's on slide 11, if you're interested. But the general
Cara,
fund.
Can you repeat the question? So about live TV.
Now, the largest positive change here is in this other category. I'm wondering what that accounts for.
Yeah, that,
Before, just as a matter of documentation and for folks tuning in on YouTube, I'll repeat the questions just for everybody to be able to hear since you're not mic'd. The question was on page 11, what is the increase, generally speaking, of the other category?
yes.
also-
The other category includes transfers in from a couple of other revenue sources I mentioned earlier, which were the restaurant tax, which is, goes to the Convention and Sports Facility Trust Fund, and the restaurant, which goes to the Convention and Tourism Fund, and the hotel tax, which comes through the Convention and Sports Facility Trust Fund. If you remember, if you looked on previous graph, those were up significantly this year. So the fact that they are outperforming as much means there's more money in those particular two funds, which are then transferred to the general fund. So that's why that particular line is higher.
Okay. Did you have a question? Was there another question? Yes.
Thank you, Elaine Barbara. And I was wondering about the relationship of taxes with AT&T. I looked on the budget at last year's, and there's always a link there. And it seems on my personal bill, the taxes, local taxes for AT&T bills me for, it's steady on the increase. So I don't understand where the relationship.
Sure.
Okay, and the question was, what is the relationship between AT&T, the charges, the local taxes charged on a consumer bill versus what the revenue for the city is?
Okay. Yeah, in it's another one of those transfers in that we also, there are taxes that we get from AT&T. There used to be, actually, those revenues have been declining over a long period of time because as people gotten rid of landlines and such, we've seen it come down. Back when we did a sales tax for public safety pensions and such, for police and fire, there was also another ordinance that was passed that said a particular portion of the tax on telecommunications would be allocated to the employee retirement system. And at the time, those revenues were generating about $13 million a year. And I believe it was, and I can't remember the total, but it says, this much of those revenues shall be allocated to a pension trust fund, which we then transfer into the general fund. And then whatever else goes into the general fund directly. Well, as those revenues have declined, whatever's been deposited in general revenue, there is no excess there. And the revenues themselves, between $5 and $6 million per year. It is in the revenue book if you look, and I could show it to you if you need to see it. But it's in a pension trust fund, and it's one of those special funds. Those monies are just transferred directly to the general fund, and we contribute to the ERS, our employee retirement system. But that's where those revenues are. But it has been declining over time simply because, if you probably raise of hands, how many people have cell phones rather than landlines, and some of those cell phones aren't even in the city proper, so we don't receive taxes from those. So.
You said there was an ordinance?
There was an ordinance way back, and it didn't change the amount of taxes, it just allocated where they were going to go.
Do you remember the name of it?
I don't recall the exact ordinance number, but it ended up being it was a public employees pension trust, or it established that fund, and you'll see that in the revenue book as a special fund under Fund 1111.
And if you'd like to follow up with us next week, I'm sure one of us could find the ordinance for you. Okay. Any other questions for the budget director before we go into public comment? Okay. Before we go into public comment, I just want to first thank STL TV for coming out today, everybody for being here, our staff for giving up the part of their Saturday, of course, the budget director, members of the committee, and I also want to recognize there are members of the mayor's cabinet here today, as well as at least one other alderperson. I believe I saw Alderwoman Clark Hubbard. Oh, she's hiding. Okay, yes. Because it really is important to us to hear from the public. As the budget director mentioned, the budget that we're considering today is the budget presented to the Board of Aldermen by the Board of E&A. But it is important to all of us to hear from all of you who are really the taxpayers who fund the budget, what's important to you that we spend your money on as citizens of St. Louis. With that, I'll turn it over to the committee if there's any comments before we go into public comment. Alderman Oldenburg.
I have none, thank you.
Alderwoman Schweitzer.
Thank you, Madam Chair. I'll just repeat what the chairwoman said. Thank you all so much for coming. Thanks to STLTV and staff. I can't wait to hear what you all have to say. I have notes from the last public comment session. I have a town hall in my ward at 12:30, so I have to leave at 11:30. But I'm hopeful to hear all of you before then, and if I can't, I'll watch the rest of it on YouTube. So thank you very much.
Alderwoman Saunier.
Same thing. I'm so glad to see so many faces out today and to see so many folks engaged. I too have another engagement, another community engagement a little later today. It may work out where there's time, but I'll have to head out as well eventually.
And Alderman Aldridge.
Thank you, Madam Chair, members of the committee. Echoing everything my members said before me, really appreciate everybody coming out this Saturday morning to hear about the budget and the process and get your input. I know this committee under the chairwoman has been very serious about really diving into the budget and figuring out ways that we can make sure that tax dollars in the city of St. Louis are really being utilized. So appreciate you for being here, giving ideas, and hate to be like the third person, but also have a previous engagement, so may have to get about at 11, but also we'll watch it. But depending on how many speakers we got, I think we should be able to make it all. So thank you again for being here so much. Thank you.
The sound system is really good.
I have no engagements, so I'll be here. With that, just to reiterate, if you did want to speak, please go ahead and sign up. We're going to be taking speakers in order. And with that, what I'd like to do, anybody who has signed up, we do require taking an oath. So I'll just, instead of having you each swear individually, I will ask everybody who has signed up or plans to speak to please participate in the group oath that we're going to do together here. Raise your right hand. Do you swear or affirm that the testimony you are about to give in this cause will be the truth, the whole truth, and nothing but the truth? Yes. Excellent. Thank you so much. All right. With that, let's go ahead and get started. We're going to ask each individual speaker to come up to the microphone. I'll ask you to introduce yourself. Give us some general sense if you're representing yourself, an organization, an entity, and where you might reside, generally speaking, in the city. You can share with us whatever you feel comfortable, your neighborhood, your block, or something just to kind of give us a sense of geography. Okay, we're giving everyone 3 minutes. I am not a professional timekeeper, but I'll do my best to give you a 30-second warning, and then, of course, we'll beep you out when you're done. Our first speaker is Brian Kruger. Okay.
My name is Brian Kruger. I live in the fabulous 14th Ward, which this year is the host neighborhood for the Whitaker Summer Concert Series beginning on June the 22nd.
Noted.
Good morning to you, Chair Spencer, and members of the Budget and Public Employees Committee. Again, my name is Brian Kruger. My wife Sherry and I are proud longtime residents of St. Louis Place neighborhood on the near north side, now in our 20th year. And I come here today to speak against the current method of ward capital allocation, that being of equal portions. As a longtime resident of St. Louis Place, every day I see the devastation caused by lack of investment in my neighborhoods. There's bad streets, bad sidewalks in some areas, houses that need demolition, other issues that could be addressed through ward capital. We need a large investment so our streets can become safer, not the current racetrack situation that we have now. We need other improvements, including traffic calming measures and pedestrian-friendly lighting. Because of the lack of both public and private investment, many north side and similarly Southside neighborhoods and wards are also suffering. The amount of funding our neighborhood needs far exceed the 1/14 split that each ward will receive under the current system. I encourage this body to consider using census and American Community Survey, or ACS, metrics. This data can help local officials, community leaders, and businesses understand the changes taking place in their communities. It's the premier source for detailed population and housing information. Examples could be identifying areas with disproportionately high level of elderly or disabled residents, higher than average number of persons with low or fixed income, more renters, people who use public transit or don't have access to a vehicle. Consider this type of information as a means to allocate the necessary resources to help neighborhoods like St. Louis Place begin the rebuilding process. It's past time for a more equitable distribution of ward capital to take place, and I hope the board takes this important step to move neighborhoods like St. Louis Place and others forward. I thank you for your time this morning.
Thank you, Brian. And if you don't mind, maybe you could share with the committee those sources after the meeting, following up, the sources you mentioned and where we could find the data you cited. Okay. Thank you. Okay, our next speaker, Taylor March.
Thank you. I'm Taylor March. Thank you, Madam Chair.
Yes, excuse me. Sorry, Taylor.
Yeah.
I'm going to give my committee members an opportunity to respond to the previous testimony. In order, Oldenburg,
I have nothing.
Schweitzer, Saunier.
I want to respond. Last year in the legislative session, a bill was proposed around what you're talking about, where it would have split up ward capital. 70% of it would have been split up equally, but then the other 30% would have been split up based on some of the equity factors that you named. That was a bill, though, so I don't know. I mean, eventually it would get signed to a committee. I'm not sure which one, but I would just say, to just in full honesty and in education for people watching at home, to keep your eye out, because perhaps something like that will come again. But also, there was representatives in areas that maybe could have benefited from that equitable splitting up that actually weren't in support and voted against that bill. So I would just encourage you all and everyone watching at home to, I'll see if I can get the board bill number, and maybe that's something that could be shared, but to make sure that you reach out to all 14 of us and let us know that that's something that you want and you want to see, and especially to folks, in those areas, since there was some folks who voted against it.
Alderman Aldridge.
Thank you, Brian, for coming. Like you say, fabulous 14th Ward resident, very dedicated, been active in the community and really trying to help a neighborhood, like you say, that has been disinvested, don't have a lot of resources over in the St. Louis neighborhood place, but you've been a champion of that community, mentored a lot of folks, including myself. So I continue to appreciate your not just honesty, but passion for the community that you've been living in for a long time. And shouting out the Whitaker Festival that starts, is it June 22nd? June 22nd, St. Louis Ave and Rauschenbach. Please come out. There are 4 series back to back. There's flyers. If you drive down St. Louis Avenue, you'll see the signs and everything, but it's a great concert. Everybody throughout the city comes out, so please come out.
Thank you. I'll add that even if we put all of the ward capital in one ward, it's not nearly enough for the disinvestment we've seen over decades and the lack of investment in infrastructure and the base level of streets and other things our cities and our communities and neighborhoods need. So not only does the distribution matter, but the amount that we're putting towards that work really matters. Okay, next up, Taylor.
All right, thank you very much. Thank you, Madam Chair and members of the committee, and for Budget Director Paul Payne for coming and making this open format today. This is a great thing to see. Again, I'm Taylor March. I live in the 6400 block of Minnesota in the lovely Ward 1, and I've been a regular walk, bike, and bus commuter in the city of St. Louis for over 15 years. My comments are going to echo what he said and also some of the things that were just said in response to that as well. I've served in a professional capacity in a streets kind of advisory role as an individual citizen for 8 years and have now moved on to a statewide role. But the current system for ward capital and addressing streets is not working for our residents. For the last few years, I've been kind of diving in and trying to understand just kind of in theory, what is the amount that we're able to spend on streets, and then what does that need to be? And so I'm going to paint you a small picture with some of the things that I've found. So ward capital and the St. Louis Works funds are the two primary mechanisms by which most street improvements are made. There's a few others, and there's also federal funds, but we're going to exclude those just for a sense of maintenance liabilities and things like that. And we're also going to do this with the perspective of the dollars just to keep our streets as they are now. As we all know, there's an enormous amount of traffic fatalities. We're seeing an increase rise in the number of traffic fatalities with people walking and biking, and our streets really need updates in terms of traffic calming. Sidewalks, we're not going to include that in the assessment that I'm kind of mentally going to walk through here in a second. We also want to keep in mind as we go through this that the Transportation Equity Assessment Report from East West Gateway recently found that in the lowest 10% of our income population census tracts, those represented 33.5% of our fatalities with people walking and biking. So this disproportionately impacts people who are lower income within our neighborhoods. And the ward capital system is one of the primary mechanisms that I think is kind of leading to some of those inequities. So generally, pavement in the city of St. Louis has about a 12-year lifespan. Markings are totally separate from that. Markings need to be refreshed 6 months to a year at minimum. We're also not going to be including the planning needed to update and address traffic fatalities, coordinate with Spire and Ameren, which we know is a much needed thing in terms of keeping those investments in place. Generally, pavement is about $1 a square foot. Our residential streets are about 36 feet wide, and so we need about $190,000 per mile to repave streets. The current ward capital system is would repave for about 55 miles. St. Louis Works is about 29. That's 84 miles total each year. We need at least 116 to keep up with maintenance. We're not meeting that, and we need additional sources of investment. So my encouragement would be to look for other sources to balance the need. Again, that doesn't include sidewalks and all the other needs that we need to make it safer for people on our streets. And thank you so much for your time and the ability to speak.
Thank you, Taylor. Comments from the committee? Alderwoman Schweitzer?
Thank you so much for those comments. I am honored to represent you as your alderperson. It's so interesting hearing you talk on ward capital because you really hit the nail on the head with how many different things ward capital is supposed to pay for and how few of those things it can fund fully if that's the only source or a relied upon source as heavily as it is. Throw into the mix that aldermen work with the various departments to assign ward capital. Throw into that mix that the alderman changes every 2 to 4 years. Throw into that mix that right now with our ward changing boundaries, we have all of the unallocated, unencumbered funds from the last session that are currently floating in the ethos, waiting to be assigned to aldermen to allocate. So we're sitting here in our ward capital budget meetings, not able to think about as how much money actually is needed. Plus, you have departments coming to you saying, well, I mean, what do you want to repave? What? How is that possibly the right way of doing things? So moving the money to just differently distributed 14 ways doesn't answer the majority of those problems in my mind, which is why I did not support doing that, especially because I made sure at the end of my last term that every single dollar of 13th Ward capital was allocated to projects within the boundaries, and that didn't even cover all of the needs in the 13th Ward. So I think all of us are up here thinking, how do we make sure that these problems don't happen in our individual wards? I've had intersections where people have died, have been in horrible accidents, and my ward capital money has gone towards those intersections when I've made decisions. But that's not how every alderman thinks, and that's not how every alderman acts. We've had so much unallocated money in a lot of different ward capital funds for a long time. So the idea of just letting each alderperson continue down that path where they don't really have to allocate any of these funds when we all know how much these funds are needed, As you can see from what I'm saying here, it's just an and what Taylor so eloquently explained is how complicated this is, as well as how much money is really needed for all these projects. That all said, I am so open to having this conversation. This would be the conversation that would occur in my committee, the Public Infrastructure and Utilities Committee. And so I do look forward to having more conversations around ward capital and thinking about especially these other income sources that will be needed. As Taylor again explained, well, what is there doesn't even cover basic repaving of streets. And we all know that there's so much more needed on all of our streets. As well as sidewalks, as well as the fact that refuse asked for $100,000 from each ward for trash cans, and forestry asked for $46,000 for each ward for street trees. And we have 8,000 street trees on the list that need to be trimmed or cut down. So we could keep going pretty long time on this. And I'll yield to my committee members, but I just wanted to, I think Taylor probably would have said a lot of those things had he had more time. So we've talked about this at length. So thank you very much for that comment.
Thank you. Alderwoman Saunier.
Yeah, I want to keep my comments very brief so we can keep going and get through everyone. But, you know, in my analysis, and I've said this before, I think that our system, you know, alders are not urban planners. They are not, you know, street designers. And I think that it is too power heavy. It's too much power in one person's hands who has no formal training or expertise in how to design a community and how to maintain, as far as streets and how to maintain it. You know, I think our role is supposed to be like policy and legislation, and maybe having input and listening up citizens' concerns, but a lot of it, like Alderwoman Schweitzer said, is very reliant upon the alder, and that's dangerous for a couple of reasons. I've heard of instances where constituents they have a disagreement or a conflict with their alder, and then, you know, no help in that area. Or, you know, in different communities, areas are also in different levels of need. You know, I find that in some of my, in the ward I represent, the areas that are well-do, they are able to kind of lift up to me what their issues are, because that's more of a focus. This is wrong with the street, this is wrong with that, versus in other areas that are dealing more with other like inequity issues, they're not lifting up their issues, even though those communities might be in a very strong need for some community improvements. So I too think it is, you know, time that we have a conversation about ward capital. I hope that my colleagues would be willing to give up a little bit of our individual power so that we can have an overall better system. And I also do think, you know, to the means of the bill that came last year, I do think that a part of that conversation has to also involve an equity lens and a focus on areas that have been, you know, disinvested in intentionally.
Alderman Aldridge.
Thank you. Also keep it brief, and then we say we keep it brief and go for about like 4 or 5 minutes, right? I promise I'm not gonna do that. I'll just say what I've learned coming from the state level. The city is definitely antiquated. It's a lot of systems. It's the 21st century, but we operate like we're in the 20th century, and that's being nice. And like Alderman and Sonia said, we're not street planners, we're not designers. I think there is a conversation at some point of how do we move to a place where ward capital is being put directly into department hands. Note also, departments need support as well. Even as we try to go to these different departments, we put in projects. Sometimes it takes 6, 8, 16 months because of just a lack of staff and contracts. So also looking at that, if we just give them money without the manpower, will they also still just be sitting on the money? And we just only thing we did is reallocate it. I know each ward has very unique needs. You know, there's probably no part of the city that doesn't need a little TLC. But like Alderwoman Spencer said, I don't think we shouldn't be taking one from the other, but I also think there's others that are just so far behind. When we talk about traffic studies and we talk about traffic safety, we see that in parts of our city, but we do not have the opportunity to see that throughout the whole city. So I think even as we're trying to figure out what is the best solution, I do think we have to do it in an equitable way so that we can catch everyone up to just a basic running city. In some spots, it's like a war zone, and other spots, it's like Disneyland. But like I say, we all do need help, and I appreciate your comments, though.
Thank you, Alderman Aldridge. For a little bit of perspective, I'll add that our ward capital is less than 15 million. This is out of a budget of 1.3 billion. And when ward capital was established, it was never really ever meant to be the street paving portion of the city's budget. It was designed to be neighborhood pots of money for your parks, for, neighborhood improvements that we need, lighting, et cetera. And over many years, it has become the go-to for street paving, for dumpsters, for tree removal, et cetera. And that is never what its intention was, nor is it what its amount could possibly begin to do. As Taylor pointed out, even if we used all of the ward capital for paving, it still wouldn't get us where we need to be. And we still need it for your parks improvements, when you need a new slide in your playground, when you need new LED lighting, when you need anything as it pertains to your neighborhood. And it's totally not, I would argue that ward capital could stay exactly the same, and we need to find an infrastructure budget outside of what we're supposed to be spending on neighborhood projects. So, that's maybe a radical position on it, but I would say leave it the same and find the real funding we need for streets and how we support infrastructure in our city. Okay. But it is certainly not falling on deaf ears here. Our next speaker is Daisy Jones.
Hi, my name is Daisy Jones. I'm a member of the 5th Ward. I live on Chippewa currently. I'm here to discuss today the FY24 budget. I'm here to ask that we take $10 million from the SLMPD and SWAT and instead try to put that towards non-policing mental health solutions or services for the community. It's very confusing to me in any situation I've been involved personally that involved self-harm, suicide, overdose, addiction, anything like that, why police were involved in it. Any police officer that was involved in that situation seemed extremely disinterested or misinformed on how to handle that situation. On top of that, from my own personal involvement and people that I've heard stories from, makes the situation so much more intense. Even in situations like domestic violence or domestic disputes, that is a trigger word almost for most people in that home if a police officer gets mentioned. Instead, having a position where someone that is trained or educated on mental health or addiction services that could come in and help and diffuse those situations for people or help and administer medical care for someone who is going through an addiction or going through family situations would probably be a lot more needed and a lot cheaper to fund probably than just throwing money towards the police and expecting them to handle situations they're not educated for. I think that's all I had to say today. I appreciate you guys' time. Thank you.
Thank you. Comments from the committee?
Thank the speaker.
Thank you.
Thank you.
Thank you.
Our next speaker, I'm apologizing in advance. I think it's Ainsley.
You got it right. Can you hear me?
Barely. Yes. Thank you.
Can you hear me now?
A little better.
A little better.
Okay. My name is Ainsley Harkins. I'm from Ward 5. I also want y'all to take $10 million from SWAT, the LMPD vacant positions, and extra overtime money that is not being used that could be reapportioned for things our city does need. I think just the two comments that were before Daisy and I show that there are a lot of things that we do need in the city, but we're seeing such high prioritization of police spending when everyone who's coming here, you don't have people saying, I haven't heard one person say, like, we need more police, we need more cops. Because right now, we need more money to go into holistic solutions for our city. Like, I think one thing is just to even think about is that anytime someone says, I'm going to call the cops, that's a threat. That's 100% a threat. And when we think that this is how these are the same people who are going to be showing up every time there's going to be a suicide, there's domestic violence, if someone gets pulled over for speeding, it's basically a threat showing up, someone you don't know with a gun who has a history of policing, harassing, and hurting other individuals. So when you think about that, what can we think? If we take that money away from the police, what can we put it into? I think we can put it into counseling. Or if we move the traffic enforcement away from the SLMPD and put it into the street departments, I think anyone here would prefer to have a meter maid show up to their car when they were speeding instead of someone with a gun. That's just me. But it's also to think about is that the number one reason people come into contact with police is because of traffic stops. And that's also a huge fatality tons of fatalities. St. Louis Police Department is one of the most violent police departments nationwide. So if we think that we can take all those traffic stops away, that's about 40% of community people engagement with that. How many lives could we save? I think that there have been proven alternatives within St. Louis too, like Cure Violence, where it's training community members of high violence level neighborhoods how to deal with violence. And since those have happened, 26% of homicide rates in St. Louis have dropped. And that's not because someone with a gun shows up. That's causing more violence. That's escalating a situation. Just in Wells Goodfellow, 70% homicide rate, or in Walnut Park West, that's an 80% homicide rate drop. So I think that there are a lot of solutions, and that so much of our budget, as we just saw on the screen, is put into policing when there is clearly so many more things that we need to be prioritizing. And the fact that I think, as well, it's fair to say that policing is hurting our communities. It's hurting it. So once again, I'm asking that you take $10 million from SWAT, SLMPD vacancies, and overtime, and invest in non-policing first responder alternative programs. Thank you very much.
No, thank you.
Thank you.
Thank you.
Our next speaker is Amber Kidner.
My name is Amber Kidner, and I am a resident of the 6th Ward. I'm here today to testify on the FY24 budget. I would like you to consider taking $10 million from spending on SWAT, SLMPD, vacant positions, and police overtime, and put that into a non-police first responder alternative program. I like the word innovate, which means to introduce something new. I'm here today to support innovative conversations and decision-making for my city in designing new and more equitable and effective approaches to traffic enforcement. I'd like to see traffic enforcement shifted from the police department to the streets department or to an independent traffic agency. This would look like trimming traffic codes to only include traffic violations that put motorists or pedestrians at risk of imminent danger, and decreasing financial incentives that often fuel traffic enforcement, and eliminating the power to search a vehicle or have a driver step out of a car, thus taking away the potential for a traffic stop escalating into violence. The researcher and law professor Jordan Blair Woods says, perhaps if traffic stops were just about traffic and not criminal investigations, then these invocations of police authority would no longer be necessary to effectuate the purpose of the stop. Let's reframe traffic enforcement as a transportation safety concern and not a police problem. There are ripple effects in our choices. With this awareness, I want to invite you to consider what doors open when we let go of relationships that no longer serve us. What new possibilities emerge? In closing, I would like you to consider taking $10 million from spending on SWAT, SLMPD vacant positions, and police overtime, and put that into a non-police first responder alternative program. Thank you.
Thank you.
Our next speaker is Tammy Buford.
Good morning, everybody. My name is Tammy Bufford. I am an abolition organizer with Action St. Louis, and I work with the Defund, Revision, Transform campaign, and I'm also an impacted family member of fatal state violence. I'm here today to testify on the fiscal year 24 budget, In the fiscal year 24 budget, the SLMPD is allotted more money than any other department in the city. They're set to receive $233 million. For every dollar that we give to the SLMPD, we're only giving 1 cent to Human Services. SLMPD has more police per capita than any other city, and it shows with the highest rate of killings than any other city as well. Police do not keep us safe. Police do not prevent crimes. Police do not solve crimes. Police commit crimes and murder. Then they say they fear for their life in order to get away with it. In April 2014, SLMPD pulled my son Cortez over for a traffic violation, and they beat him. He filed a lawsuit against them and won, and after he won the lawsuit, he was told he would have a target on his back. And then in December 2019, the police made good on that threat when Officer Lucas Roethlisberger murdered my son. Instead of investing money in the police, we should be investing money into programs that actually keep us safe and address the root cause to the problems. We should be investing in human services, job training, affordable housing, right to counsel, mental health. We have tons of schools that are closed in our neighborhoods and also rec centers. It's the summertime and the kids are out now and they have nothing to do with their time but hang out in the street. We need to be addressing those alternatives and giving them something to do other than hang out in the streets. If we cannot take the entire police budget, I ask that you take a minimum of $10 million from ShotSpotter, SWAT, overtime, and vacant positions, and move that money into non-police first responder programs. Thank you.
Thank you, Tammy. I apologize for mispronouncing your name. Thank you for sharing your story. Any comments?
Thank you.
Thank you.
For sharing their story. I know it was personal, so thank you.
Our next speaker is Gwendolyn.
No, you haven't. It's Gwendolyn Cogshell. My name is Gwendolyn Cogshell. I'm a community activist. I'm an outreach person for University African People's Organization. I'm also a longtime resident, 60-year resident, Academy Sherman Park. Samim is Herbert is my Alderman. That's how I know about this program. First of all, I think you all need to spend a little more time on communication and outreach. I don't think this room represents the 300,000 people that's in this community. I think the Alderman needs to do a better job at that. The other thing is that when you all gave that money out, I love St. Louis Development Corporation, the individuals that work in that department, because every time I called them, they reached out to me and they told me. But the problem I was having was about the candy store man in Walnut Park that owns the candy store, or the man in Walnut Park that owns the little tire shop. They didn't get the $5,000 when that money dropped because they didn't know about the money. So what I'm saying is it needs to be some more better communication and outreach. I want to piggyback off what she said because that's why I'm here today. We had 9 young men in our community who was murdered, and I mean on my block alone, who was murdered because what they've done is they closed all our schools. They took Clark School away from us, Enright away from us, and they turned it into apartment buildings. Now Delmar Divide, because I couldn't get a loan. Thank God for Darlene Green's program, because that's the only way I can get a loan, because they redlined me. I couldn't get a loan 6 blocks from Forest Park, but I couldn't get a loan because I was redlined. If it wasn't for her, I wasn't able to get it. So they're coming over now. It's money coming down. We got all the developers that's bought off everybody that suffered in that community. Of course they're going to sell out. Their buildings falling apart. We couldn't get any loans, so they sold everything out to Delmar, not Divine, but to Delmar makers and all of those. I'm here today to talk about the West End Community Center that's been in the community center forever. Demetrius Johnson was in the building. The building is falling apart. I dare somebody say that they trying to buy that. That's our community center for our children. We've been in there forever since the 60s. That's where we went. And like she said, it's too much going on in this community. If we lose that building, I'd suggest you take the $10 million and do what she say and put it in community centers, because that's the place where we need to be. That's the only place we have left. They done bought up everything else. They done came up and bought up our lots and everything else. No, we don't have any money. They know we don't have any money, and these people have the opportunity. We own that, the city own that building, and they can sell it to sell it for $1, but I don't want you to sell it. I want you to put employees back in there like it was in the 60s, put the employees back in there, and keep that building open for the people in Academy Sherman Park. Thank you.
Thank you, Gwendolyn.
Thank you.
Thank you, Gwen.
Thank you, Glenn.
Our next speaker is Elaine Laura.
Oh, don't hurt them now.
Hello, everyone. I am so proud of St. Louis. Oh, wow. I can't believe that we had such a great turnout, because if I hadn't looked on the city's website, I'm single, and I go on the website all the time. And I had looked, and I saw that the budget meeting was today, but I didn't write it down. And so this morning, I said, I'm supposed to be somewhere at 10 o'clock. And I started looking at my emails. Where's the emails? Where's the email? But the city didn't really publicize this. And I take fault with the Board of Alder people for not publicizing it, because these are the ones that were unified and came as a group. How many of us would have come as single entities if we had known about it? But nevertheless, that's not what I'm beefing about. The descriptor of New York City's automated meter reading, AMR devices that connect to individual water meters left me coveting my neighbor's meters. These tech devices transmit readings to a computerized billing system up to 4 times a day. This technology enables customers to view and manage their water consumption on a daily, weekly, monthly, and yearly basis using their accounts. Now, when you want to find out about your water bill, you can't call. It's not automated. You can't call and get a machine that will tell you how much you owe, because the St. Louis Water Department is a primitive organization. Their antiquated billing process about the size of your home on how you are consuming water doesn't make any kind of sense. I told you I was single. I raised 2 daughters, beautiful, tall, in my home that I've been in 40-odd years, maybe 50. I divorced their dad, and our dog died. And I know I'm using less water. I know it. I also am a student of Benjamin Franklin, who believed in air showers. And so after a busy morning of gardening, trying to grow my own food, I go in and strip and relax and meditate as my body cools down naturally. So I know I'm not using water. But my water bill is based upon attributes: the size of my home, 2 the 3 bedrooms, the 2 water closets, and you know, the living room. But on my water bill and my sewer bill, I'm only being charged for 1 water closet. That led me, I didn't even notice it for 35 years. I didn't notice it. I just paid the bill. And then I looked at it. The attributes that the city is charging us on are not accurate. And it would cost too much money to go to each home, knocking on the door saying, let me check your attributes. The city needs to install water meters.
Miss Elaine, I'm so sorry, I have to cut you
I
off
have
to
it
be
in
fair.
paper, I'll give it to everybody. Thank
Okay.
you.
It's true, the vast majority of our residential properties don't have meters. Do we have any comments from the members of the committee?
Sure, just to invite you all, this coming Wednesday at 3:30, we'll have a Public Infrastructure and Utilities Committee meeting. We'll be discussing the proposed water rate increases that were asked for by the Water Division, I guess, a decade ago, and we're considering them now. That's about the speed of St. Louis city government. But please come, 3:30 p.m. in the Kennedy Room, and we'll be discussing that. I've asked the the Public Utilities Director, Kurt Scobie, to speak on water meters, and we're going to have a stakeholder frequently asked questions out very soon so that everybody can hear answers to questions Ms. Lara raised, as well as questions that so many people have had about the Water Division. So it's at the Kennedy Room in City Hall. So Market Street, City Hall, 3:30 p.m., Public Infrastructure and Utilities Committee. Wednesday. Thank you.
Alderwoman Saulnier.
Hi. I just wanted to respond. I feel like I've heard a lot of comments, even at the last meeting, about outreach and timing. So I just want to give some perspective from my seat. We get sworn in April 18th. Committee assignments came out May 2nd. And then we were able to have our very first committee meeting as a public budget employees meeting on May 15th. And then by May 31st, we were having our first community hearing. So I know, like, from the other end of where we're coming from, it's like, what is the communication going? I really think what needs to happen in the process systematically is we need a larger window in order for us to have more time to talk to more people, to take more community input, to have, you know, more in-depth of a process to talk to departments. The timeline right now, honestly, in my personal opinion, the way that it's set up, it just gives you such a little window to come together with your colleagues, to identify what needs to be done. And then in that process before the public meeting, as members in a new committee, even those who are not new, you have to sit down, you have to get a presentation from every single department and coordinate with every single department to come in. And I think Chairwoman Spencer has done a great job, but I think, again, this is when I'm talking about systematic processes and things that are a problem. We have a charter commission that has been approved, and they will get to look at some things that could change these processes, and there could be more rules written in about how long should the Board of Aldermen, how long should we be able to sit with this budget? Because how long should we have to engage with community? How long should we have to make recommendations? Because right now, if we have such a limited window, if we don't pass a budget by July 1st, the budget as it is that was passed down to us just goes into effect. So I just want to give that context and explain that and lift that up as something that I think needs to be changed in order for us to absolutely engage more people, to absolutely go into more wards. We only were able to go to 2. I would love for us to be able to have time to do more, to give more context to what's going on, to share the information that we get as alders in these meetings. Thank you.
Alderman Aldridge.
No, I'll just echo, thank you for your testimony. I want to echo, again, if people can come down Wednesday at 3:30 in the Kennedy Room, we will be talking about, I think, a very important piece of legislation, water rate hikes and other things that potentially, I think with community input could be helpful as these pieces of legislation are getting crafted. So thank you again for your testimony. 3:30 Wednesday, Kennedy Room, City Hall. please put it out there, social media, everything, because folks' input is important. I do see somebody hand up.
Yeah, and we're hearing the criticism on outreach, and we're going to try to work through a better way of having some engagement. We don't currently have a budget for communication at the Board of Aldermen, and that, other than the president's office, and so we'll have to think through what that could look like as far as being able to get the word out better. So if you want to follow up with us on mechanisms or ways in which you would best receive information, or other folks you know would best receive information, please share that with us. Did you have a further comment? Yeah.
Real quick. In these meetings, would there be a Zoom link available? Because since it's such short notice, a lot of people are unable to make it down to City Hall. Can we have at least be able to get on Zoom in order to?
Right now, our staff is struggling with how to do a hybrid approach. So our meetings have either been in person or Zoom. I can't speak to the one specifically on Wednesday. I know for the budget hearings, we've chosen to do them in person because they're so complicated, and we're having department heads. And for anybody who is interested in going back, if you want to specifically see any particular human services or the police department or any of those real in-depth looks at those departments, they're all available online after the fact through YouTube. But as far as Wednesday's hearing goes, I'll let the chair of the Public Utilities and Infrastructure Committee speak to how you can engage in that particular meeting.
The meeting will be in person on Wednesday. However, I encourage you to send in any written testimony. Any written testimony that comes in, I will make sure is read during public comment.
Yeah, I think we're trying to get to a spot where we can do those hybrids, where you can come in person or Zoom. We're just not there yet. I think that will happen this summer, though, so to be as flexible as possible.
I think that money is in this budget.
To be as, to do
So,
the hybrid?
yeah, so I mean, until July 1st, that's not going to happen, hybrid. Yeah, there's, yeah.
It's okay.
Yeah, we'll work on it. Okay, I want to get through all the speakers before, yeah.
You would think so.
We
Yeah,
thought
none of
so
the
as
rooms-
well, yeah.
Yeah, none of the rooms are outfitted for Zoom yet.
Yeah.
It's all.
Before I take any, I want to be fair in how we move forward, so we'll take additional questions at the end, but just to get through all of our speakers first, our next speaker is Charles Bryson.
Good morning.
Morning.
My name is Charles Bryson. I either live in the incredible or elegant eighth. I'm not sure if it's been named yet.
The incredible.
Incredible or elegant eighth, which would you prefer?
You can describe it however you like. As a resident of the.
All right. So anyway, that's where I live. So my name is Charles Bryson. I am, thank the Chairwoman Spencer, and members of the Budget and Public Employees Committee for being here today. I'm the policy catalyst for TrailNet, which is the regional nonprofit advocacy organization devoted to safe streets. I also want to thank Mayor Jones for last year setting up a fund for a comprehensive citywide street mobility and transportation study. However, without clear vision and proper funding, that study will go to naught. What I have provided for you all is a Vision Zero resolution. This is one of the templates that nationwide and actually worldwide is being used to set up the process for Vision Zero. You already have infrastructure funding from Board Bill 184 last year, which could be used to augment the funding for a plan for Vision Zero. So I offer that to you today. The second thing I want to make clear, however, is, as it's been noted, that ward capital by itself is not enough. More resources have to be found in the city budget and outside of the city budget for our streets and our sidewalks. So perhaps that looks like funding from the Treasurer's Office or other, maybe state funding, East-West Gateway, to do some of the work necessary so that we could have a Vision Zero, no fatality, safe systems approach. And then there's I guess, my favorite, which is the funding for the 50/50 sidewalk program. That's inadequate, but it's inadequate for two reasons. One, there's not enough money. As Taylor March pointed out so correctly, the funding just isn't there for the sidewalk repair necessary. But there also is the way the program is run. What I've given you all is TrailNet did a audit, a walking sidewalk audit of the Ville and Greaterville neighborhood. As you can see by the legend, there's a lot of red, which means you're missing sidewalks. There's also the little circles that are in beige, which shows the 1-inch rise. Seniors can't do this. Elderly can't do this. We need to find a better way to do the 50/50 sidewalk program. Eliminate it, find a different way to do that so our sidewalks can be repaired so that folks have the ability and the right to walk down the street. I thank you, and I will take any questions that you may have.
Thank you.
Thank you very much.
Thank you, Charles.
Charles, I would love to see this in every neighborhood. This is so helpful. I know it's a lot of work.
We ain't got a lot of people there, but we can try it.
If anybody, a member of the, anybody here wants to see the sidewalk audit, it's really eye-opening how much need and how dangerous it is to be a pedestrian in the Greaterville neighborhood. I'll share mine if anybody wants to see it. Okay. With that,
I'm going to do Mark Abbott.
oh, yes, okay, yes.
Okay.
We have Charles
I can-
is going to be presenting the perspective of somebody with COVID.
And I'll say who he is.
Go ahead.
Okay. You ready for me?
Yes.
Okay. So my name is Mark Abbott. Mark Abbott, who is a PhD professor emeritus in history and urban affairs at Harris Stowe State University, offers this perspective. Dear members of the Budget Committee, as someone who has taught urban policy, worked with numerous community organizations, and has been involved with neighborhood planning in St. Louis for over 30 years, I would like to speak out against the current practice of distributing resources equally across wards for the following three reasons. First, the purpose of wards is not to be administrative bodies. The primary function of wards should be to ensure the geographical equal representation of the citizenry of the legislative body for the city, which is the Board of Aldermen. While St. Louis is not alone in this regard, members of the St. Louis Board have for too long seen their primary responsibility as addressing constituent affairs rather than being policymakers. Hopefully, this will change with ward reduction. However, allocating resources by ward rather than by neighborhood only reinforces this bad practice. Board members should only be concerned with the parameters of how the city's budget should be allocated, not determining where and on what it should be spent. Second, due to structural racism, wealth inequity, and environmental factors, different parts of the city have unequal needs and challenges. To budget resources equally across the city by ward not only perpetuates these inequities, it extenuates them. If the city has aggressively dealt with the housing crisis in the Greater Ville, or the deterioration of the business base in Dutchtown, or the drainage problem in Baden a generation ago, those funds would have been much greater impact. Third, the equal distribution of resources across wards is not strategic. A city's resources are finite, therefore the allocation of those resources require that choices be made over time, where, how, and in what method those resources are going to be spent necessarily fluctuates. The people who are in the best position to make those choices are the staff of the city agencies, not the members of the board. I'm sorry I could not be here today to personally testify. However, at this moment I'm dealing with COVID, but if you have any questions or would like to discuss my comments further, please do not hesitate to contact me. And he did leave his information. So,
Thank you.
thank you.
Okay. Okay, next up, we have Karen Yang.
Hi, my name is Karen Jialian Yang. I'm a resident of Ward 7, zip code 63118. I'm the Director of Storytelling and Communications for Forward Through Ferguson, and I join the echoes of residents who want to fully fund a non-police first responder alternative program in St. Louis City. At a recent Transforming 911 event, St. Louis residents said that behavioral health and mental wellness and conflict intervention is a major priority. Police are not trained or equipped to handle mental health crises, and when we think about CIT training, it's an option, and only a fraction of the hours in education required to receive a degree or license for clinical social work. There's no practicum, there's no supervision, and there's no reflection or accountability. That's like asking someone who's trained in CPR to do heart surgery. Ridiculous. We need a true non-police first responder alternative. SLMPD, as we've mentioned before, leads the nation in the most police killings by far. Embarrassing and terrible. It's a matter of life and death. We want to reduce interactions between civilians and law enforcement. That's what Specialists Rebecca Newstetter and Katrina Feldkamp say about equitable emergency response systems. We know that most killings start with traffic stops, mental health checks, disturbances, and nonviolent offenses. There's no crime alleged when you look at Mapping Police Violence, which is a resource for this information. We want to move traffic enforcement into the streets. I want justice for Bade Ali Jabir, who experienced fatal state violence as a result of SLMPD not taking into account his mental health issues as well as language access. This is a major issue. So when we think about in the 2024 budget, public safety has 51%, whereas Health and Human Services has 0.3%. That is a blatant violation of what the priorities are of the residents who are here today. And it also reveals that budgets are moral documents. Where are your morals? When we think about other public safety, that's only 0.4, and we've put that in quotes. Other public safety in the budget document refers to community and care-centered public safety approaches that are trauma-informed and health-centered. Finally, when we look at supportive reentry of the Office of Violence Prevention, we have 1.7. That is very little. I'm holding the Transforming 911 full report, which is coming out on June 14th. When you follow at STL Change on social media, you can look at ways to register for the public webinar. You can also go to bit.ly/capital T 911 report with a capital R dash webinar, capital W. Thank you.
Thank you. Thank you, Karen. Many of us did get an opportunity to see a preliminary version of that report, and it's exceptionally helpful. It's really well done, and I think it can be really helpful with us, moving forward with policy in St. Louis. So thank you for your work on that. Our next speaker is Harrison Sand.
Hi, my name is Harrison Sand. I live in the 7th Ward near Cherokee in Texas. I've lived in St. Louis for about 10 years. I've worked at Places for People as a community mental health social worker, and I currently work at the Alzheimer's Association as a managing social worker for caring for people with dementia. I'm here today, so I'm not officially part of DRT, though I live with someone that I live with, Karen or Jolien, so I knew this meeting was happening today. I just want to say, to me, it seems like the city's getting ripped off with how much that we're paying for police. Over the last 60 years, not just St. Louis, but across the nation, the amount that we pay for police has increased dramatically. And in those 60 years, the actual thing that has helped crime more than anything else was a public health measure. It was decreasing the levels of lead in the environment. That helped crime more than police over all those years. I can tell you, as a social worker that works with people that have mental health issues or dementia or caring for someone with dementia, I often get told they're afraid to call the police. I actually, within the last week, not even knowing this meeting was happening, I talked to a caregiver who's caring for their father who has frontal temporal dementia, which often causes problems with impulse control. They have had situations where they need help, but they have not called the police because they are afraid that the police will go into that situation and think that the person with dementia is the problem and start to interact with them as if they are the problem instead of helping the situation. Now, in the past, CIT was optional. I believe that has changed over recent years statewide, and now most police officers have to be crisis intervention trained. The difficulty I found about that is, in the past, I used to say, well, call the police office, ask for someone that's CIT trained, because they were someone that was interested in being trained on that. Now it's across the board trained. So they just get any police officer, and I'll tell you, we're often told, well, let's put more money into training. That will help. It doesn't. You know, you can sit in a class for as long as you want. That doesn't mean that you're going to be able to help people. I mean, if you sit in a class once, 10 years ago, or once a year, that doesn't affect change. If we wanted to do things for our city, I think we should reapportion the money. They're saying 10 million. My guess is it would be even more than that. Currently, I suggest I work with the whole state. There are different area agencies on aging for each part of the state. I love the people that work at St. Louis Area Agency on Aging, but they are the one I do not refer people to because they do not have the services that the other ones across our state have. I refer to people that Age Smart, Aging Ahead, but not St. Louis Area Agency on Aging because they don't help provide home care. They don't help. They don't do the services that all the other areas of the state are doing. So we should reapportion that money. Thank you.
Harrison, what you mentioned with the St. Louis Department of Aging, if you could share with us those missing pieces, that would be very helpful for us. I think I'm looking at my colleagues, I don't think we're aware of that. So please share that with us.
Thank you.
Okay, I'm going to excuse myself just for a moment. I'm going to hand the timer off. We have Andre Siegel.
How many are left, Cara?
No, there's 6.
Okay. 6 more left.
Okay, I have to.
Either.
Okay. Yeah, okay. My apologies for the short recess. I'd like to.
That's fine, I'm ready.
Okay. Our
Okay.
speaker,
Oh,
do you mind introducing yourself? I think I lost track.
I was about to do that.
Siegel.
Okay. My name's Andy Siegel. I'm with Defund, Envision, Transform, and I'm here because I need you all to take at least $10 million from spending on SWAT, SLMPD, vacant positions, and police overtime, and put that money into any of the options that my DRT colleagues have introduced, but here's some other ideas. 1, rent assistance programs or free, dignified housing programs for Black St. Louisans who are unhoused or housing insecure. 2, immediate investment in Black-led or Indigenous-led environmental conservation efforts. 3, affordable health care. 4, immediate investment in equitable and accessible transportation infrastructure. 5, investing in K-12 education. As my colleagues have mentioned, it's severely underfunded and neglected in St. Louis City, which is unacceptable. 6, immediate investment in food assistance programs. And so, yeah, those are some ideas. So I've been born and raised in Ladue, but I have friends and family who live in these districts. So police violence in St. Louis, both in the city and the county, is a very pressing issue on my mind. A resounding voice I hear from my blood relatives and community members in Ladue or Clayton is their fear of the city's so-called criminality. Let it be known that I'm not afraid to go to the city. In fact, I visit the city frequently. I've done weekly distributions throughout Southside, as well as Sunday breakfast downtown with Tent Mission STL, street cleanups with unhoused STL, and I've also volunteered at the annual emergency winter pop-up shelters that the city doesn't fund. I've seen time and time again at these distributions for years the ways in which these aldermen, you fail your constituents, the ways you neglect your constituents' needs and choose policing and war over social services. If there's anything I'm afraid of while living in St. Louis, it's the police presence and their rates of white supremacist state-sanctioned violence. According to St. Louis Public Radio, the St. Louis Metropolitan Police Department was responsible for more killings per capita than any other of the 100 largest police departments in the nation. According to an article published by the American Journal of Public Health, racially disparate use of force indicates that white supremacy permeates the U.S. law enforcement system. White supremacy and structural racism negatively affect health. So this is a lived reality of many St. Louisans. And in fact, I have loved ones who live in the city, who live in your districts, and are afraid to go to the county because of how violently racist, anti-Black, sexist, homophobic, classist, and transphobic the police are. It is for these reasons that I urge you to take a minimum of $10 million from police spending and put that money into rent assistance programs, environmental conservation efforts, affordable health care, equitable transportation infrastructure, K-12 education, and/or food assistance programs, because these are the social services that the people need. We do not need police in our communities. Thank you.
Thank you. Thank you for sharing your perspective. I think, one of the issues really in our region is the how we're so siloed. And some of our, the different municipalities with much higher incomes and much higher tax bases don't always participate functionally in the homeless epidemic throughout the St. Louis region. Yes, while most of the unhoused folks are in the city of St. Louis, they are a state issue, and we're not getting participation from our state and our other municipalities on that. And that's a real deficit for the city, because we are taxing many people who live in poverty to address issues of poverty, and it's not a long-term solution. And I'm hopeful that we can also take these conversations outside of just the city and broaden the conversation as well. Our next speaker is Brandon Robnett. My apologies if I mispronounced your name.
So, like you said, my name is Brandon Robnett. I'm born and raised in the 14th, what's now the 14th Ward, currently in the 6th. I'm going to pivot a little bit from what I was going to originally talk about, because a lot of you have already brought it out thoroughly and eloquently. But in one sentence, regarding that, the solution for the ward capital issue seems like it should be out there, like it doesn't need to exist. It really, giving that money to the individual departments, and not only does that take the burden off of you as individually, it prevents the misuse of that. But what I wanted to talk about was something that Ms. Gwendolyn, as she's on her way back, brought up in her testimony, which is when she brought out the things that are happening in the West End with those developers coming in and really making those people not fit, the people who have lived there not fit in. And if she thinks that's a problem there, imagine having to deal with that for the past 20 years and without a solution. And that's what the people here, right here in the Jeff Vanderloo and St. Louis Place neighborhoods have had to deal with. Predatory developers targeting this neighborhood for that many amount of years. And we have just yesterday that board bill that was introduced, which is a whole nother issue that we can talk about later, but that allows for even further blighting of the neighborhood and pushing people who have lived there forever out. And when you deal with people who have families who have been here in this neighborhood forever, like 6 generations of my family grew up and have been from around here, where my grandparents lived, the house they sold in 1978. The same family that bought that house in 1978 still owns that house. The house is on either side of them from the 60s, right there on Sullivan Avenue, just a block from here. Where are the funds going to for people who want to stay in the neighborhood, who want the home loans, who want to take care of those houses? You have good programs in the comptroller's office, in the treasurer's office, that help people who want to stay in the neighborhoods, who want to fix up their homes, and yet they're not getting more diversion of the funds. And then at the same time, so when somebody comes along saying, oh, we'll give you this amount of money for your house, it's easy for them to sell up. But what are we doing to keep the neighborhoods, the fabric of the neighborhoods, when all this new stuff comes in? What are we doing to help people who want to stay in there, who want their sense of community, who want to stay in their houses and fix that? We need to allocate more money to those programs that are helping with the home loans, the home repair loans, and the refinancing and things like that. Or people who want to move back in, who have history in this neighborhood and want to fix up these old houses. So that's what I feel like. We have good programs in the comptroller's office and the treasurer's office that help with those home loans, and we should be allocating more money to that.
Our next speaker is Xavier.
How you doing, Cara? Can you hear me?
Nope.
Is this on?
Yes.
Oh, you can hear me now. Okay, hello. My name is Xavier Phillips. I live in Dutchtown. That's where I'm from. Yeah, I didn't say that last time. I work with the artists in St. Louis. A lot of artists all over the city. I just came back from Houston this morning. It was hot, but I wanted to make it for this meeting. I used to be an activist, and then I used to run on political campaigns. I used to work political campaigns in the background, do all types of stuff. So I'm famous for saying that these meetings are kind of futile in some ways. There's some points you can't get across, some things you can't do. So let me explain what I think is part of the problem, okay? St. Louis is overpaying for our police. That's a fact. We're overpaying for them. We're overpaying for them because we're intimidated to cut their budget. That's the simple fact. Now, why don't we want to cut the St. Louis budget? It's because of all the other reasons you've listed. That's why. And because the idea is, if we don't give the police this money, then what will go up? The crime rate will go up. The streets will get worse. I don't know, there'll be more homelessness. There'll be more agitation in the streets, which may be the case, may not be the case. We've yet to see whether or not that's the case. But I will say this. Let's start with the budget itself. So the questions I asked this time and last time were pointed for a reason. I think Director Payne has been a little conservative. I think you guys are going to see positive growth this year. I think you're going to see positive growth because the hotel and the restaurant industry, along with marijuana tax, will be over 10% growth. It will, okay? On top of that, like I said, I work with the artists. You think I don't know how much pot we're smoking in St. Louis? It's a lot. It's a lot. We're going to have a decent little tax budget for that. So there will be money. Will there be 10 million? I don't know. There will be some money, more than what we've budgeted for. So there's that. Now, what to do about everything else? This meeting is designed to hear the public, but unfortunately they do not have time to act on any of our decisions because they have a month to pass this budget. And the reality is, from someone who used to work on congressional campaigns, that's just how budgets work. Okay, they get the budget, they get a chance to look at it, they get to make a couple amendments, maybe some cuts to it, and then it goes through. Most of the time, 9 times out of 10, a budget like this doesn't get touched. That's just what happens. So all you can do to try and change it is something that cannot happen in this meeting. You see this camera right here? This is my camera. I brought a camera. You create a platform. You put the words you want on that platform out in public, and you make sure that everyone else hears about it. This meeting, I'm not saying it's a farce, but there's only so much it can accomplish, okay? The real change has to be when you go to the poll, and then the second change we'll have to do is quite simply demonstrate that we want this to happen. We want the streets fixed. I know a guy, he got 17,000 likes on a post on social media because he ran through a pothole off Broadway somewhere and tore his fender off.
Mm-hmm. I saw that post.
You saw it, okay? Funny kid. So what are we going to do? The best thing we can do is collaborate as citizens, make sure we spread the information, get people here, and make sure that we see that there's only 2 out of the 5 board members sitting here. I'm sorry that they're gone. But we should make sure that everyone sees that they're not here on the most important budget meeting day of the year.
Well, thank you, Xavier. Next up is Fatima.
Good morning. I'm Fatima Kamara. I live in the real West End in the 10th Ward. I am collaborating as a citizen with the DRT, Defund, Re-Envision, Transform campaign and the We the Tenants campaign. I recommend that the budget takes $10 million out of ineffective means of public safety from ShotSpotter, SWAT, SLMPD vacant positions, and overtime to invest in non-police first responder alternatives. I'd like to point out that this board calls itself progressive, and it had long diatribes in response to the testimonies from people who were talking about streets and ward capital, and they were giving their diatribes in response to that and giving their diatribes in response to why this meeting was poorly publicized. But virtually nothing has been said in response to taking money out of the police budget. Virtually nothing. And I know a lot of people in this room spoke on it. So I feel like this reflects the city's culture of hiding its biases in plain sight. The city had no problem surveilling people through house arrest, changing from surveilling people through house arrest to locking them up and requesting no bail after the accident with the young lady downtown, which was indeed tragic. But an accident happened at Forest Park and Grand about 2 weeks later that took the lives of 4 children, Richard, Brianna, Contrail, and Anthony, 4 Black children, changed the lives of 4 more, and nothing has been done at that intersection but put up a cement block. The city is responsive when it wants to be. A cement block. And I feel in danger at that intersection on a regular basis. Since she doesn't have the mic, a lady just said she doesn't even go that way. A lot of people in this city were affected by that accident. It's definitely changed me. Again, the city is responsive when it wants to be, so be responsive to our request that you take $10 million or more, because there's plenty more in this $1.3 billion budget, and move it into things that are actually going to keep our community safe, that are actually going to let everybody in this city thrive. If you want to reduce crime, you can invest in the community. Fund the Right to Counsel program that didn't make it through last time, that's going to be brought up again this week. Give the city a rental assistance program again, it's desperately needed. I work with the We the Tenants campaign. People are asking about rental assistance every single day. It's desperately needed. Crime will go up when people are kicked out of their houses and have nowhere to go. So please, 10 million or more out of ShotSpotter, SLMPD vacant positions, SWAT, and other means of policing that don't keep us safe. Thank you.
Our next speaker is Inez.
Pull up my notes. Just kidding. I didn't take notes. I don't need notes. My name is Inez Bordeaux. I wear a lot of hats. I'm the committee woman for the 3rd Ward. I'm the manager of community collaborations at Arch City Defenders, which means I'm an organizer. I'm a mom of 4 Black children. I'm a nurse. I organize with the DRT campaign, the Defund, Re-Envision, Transform campaign. I'm also an organizer with the Close the Workhouse campaign. And I want to start my remarks by reading a tweet from April 28th, 2023, from Alder Tom Oldenburg, who said, "This radical group was at City Hall advocating that SLMPD doesn't keep us safe and should be defunded. These aren't serious people and shouldn't be near decision makers." That was when we showed up to City Hall. Half the people in this room are from the DRT campaign, are members of the DRT campaign, and almost everybody left is a concerned citizen. So I think it's important that we know what I think it's important that you know what your alder thinks about your advocacy efforts in St. Louis, that you aren't serious and you shouldn't be anywhere near decision makers. So Yes, like everybody else said, we should defund SWAT, ShotSpotter. We should defund the 120 or so odd vacant positions inside of SLMPD that the police use as a slush fund to do whatever they want with without any accountability. We should also invest a massive amount of money in a non-police response unit. People who are actually trained to do the job that we need them to do. I think Transforming 911 has done study after study that says most of the calls that come through 911 don't actually need police at all. They need a person that can come out and help someone who is dealing with an addiction or dealing with a mental health crisis. Very few of those calls actually require the police. And I want to use the rest of my time to talk about how disappointed I am in this process. We have 5 people on this committee. 3 of them are gone. I know Alder Rasheen and Alder Alicia had a previous engagement from a while ago. Alder Ann must obviously have something else to do. The fact that the committee is not even here to listen to the people, and Schweitzer on the way out the door saying, oh, well, it's recorded. That is not the same thing as being here in front of us. By them not being here, that is telling us that they do not hear our priorities. We are not their priority. I have been watching these committee hearings for onwards of 8 years. We know when the budget process is going to start. It's like clockwork. I can look at my calendar right now and tell you when the E&A meeting in April will be of 2024. We know that that is the start of the budget cycle. We know that Paul Payne is either the day before or the day after going to do the budget presentation. You know that you have to hear from the department heads. Why aren't these things being prepared in advance? The day after you all were sworn in, the day before committee assignments came out, the department heads should have already been notified. Y'all could have had all of the department head hearings in 1 week. You could have done all of the department head hearings in 1 week, and you could have used the 3 remaining weeks of May to hear from the people.
Inez,
y'all have the budget purse strings.
Inez.
You don't have a budget for communications, create a budget for communications. Because listen, this is unacceptable. 2 of the 5 people on this committee are new, so I'm not holding it against them, but y'all have been here. Y'all know how this process works. You're not new to this. Like, figure it out. Since when can we not have a Zoom hearing?
Okay, all right. Hey, I understand, but I'm trying to be fair to everybody else we cut off. And I will say, Inez, we didn't get committee assignments from the president of the board until several weeks after there was a new process.
It was May 2nd, yeah.
And, we have to rely on our staff. We don't, as the budget director pointed out, we don't have the authority to add budget.
You can move money around.
No, we really.
You can move money around. You can't add anything to the budget, but you can certainly take it away.
The only entity that can actually move money around is the Board of E&A.
Megan's on the board. I'm sure if you had talked to her, she would have been happy to move things around for you. So what I'm saying, Cara, is that there is no excuse. The people in this room are not willing to accept an excuse. And I'm going to make sure that every single person, as many people as I can reach, know that Tom Oldenburg says that we are unserious and we should not be anywhere near decision makers, and that 3 of the 5 people on this committee are not here to be able to listen to the people. That is a scheduling issue. I don't know if y'all need to send out a when to meet or a doodle poll to figure out when the best time when everybody, it's only 5 of y'all. I work for an organization. I frequently coordinate the schedules of.
Inez, I'm sorry, but we did cut off everybody else.
I'm going to close here.
I know, but this is.
But I want to thank you all for your time. I appreciate the 2 of you, I guess, showing up, even though Tom has been sitting here rolling his eyes and we know he don't care about what we think.
Inez, we have to be fair.
And with that, I'm going to close. Thank you so much.
Thank you. I will say, there is no excuse. We do need to make a better process. This is my first time chairing the Budget and Public Employees hearing. I'm really grateful for our clerk, Terry Kennedy, who under his leadership, going back 15 years, started public hearings as the chair of Budget of Ways and Means. And I have to thank our staff. I had to rely on them to make sure that it was convenient for our staff members to come. And I did put it in the purview of our clerk, who did an excellent job doing the best he could, making it most accommodating to the most amount of people. I would really appreciate advocacy for the Board of Aldermen to have a budget for communication. We do not currently have that. I did my best to post it on my social media, but really I know that's totally inadequate, and without an actual budget, we can only do so much. So again, we welcome, and I would really, really, really appreciate some insight as to what members of the public view to be the best methods of communicating, because absolutely it is not lost on us that this is not representative of our city or even the neighborhood that we are currently sitting in right now. And so please communicate that to the other folks. And we really do appreciate the insight. And I made it a priority to be here today. I can't speak to everybody else, but we do have to sometimes rely on what's best for our staff, STL TV, and the other folks that are present. Okay, well, it's not an excuse. I'm simply offering the facts that I have, that are in place. Our last speaker, and I will, if the venue and our staff are able to accommodate additional questions, we can take those. But we have one last speaker, and I am going to apologize. I am having a hard time reading it, the name, so I'm probably going to mispronounce it. Shanika Owens? Did they step out?
I saw her when she came in, but her car's not
Okay.
outside anymore, so she may be gone.
Okay, so we may actually be done with public testimony right at noon. Do we know if we have a few more? I know they wanted us to leave at noon. Do we have a few additional minutes? Okay. If we had any additional questions or thoughts, we can take them at this time.
Can I just say something about the potholes? I got 2 busted tires. I just want to tell you all about the streets. When Light Cruiser was in office, she made a deal with Spire, and I know you all been saying Spire tear up the streets and put these
Thank you,
big
Paul.
holes in the streets.
Mhm.
And
Thanks, Paul.
what happened was that she made a deal that she was gonna pave over after they got to tearing up the streets out of our budget. Like Cruiser said, I'm gonna pave over it. So they left them like, they didn't totally pave over them, they just left them like that. So now the little veins and stuff is going out of these big old squares that they put in there, and they causing all these
Okay.
potholes.
Well, we have to go.
I don't understand why we're paying
Yeah.
for that. I'm just asking you, did you all straighten that out with Spire?
So I will say the process, and I just we were just indicated we do have to vacate at noon, but on the streets front and the pothole front, I'll say earlier this year, I broke my front axle on a pothole because my car, which is 20 years old, hit the last pothole that its axle could withstand, and the thing broke in half. And it is really bad. One of the things that we're working on, we know we have a deficit in the pothole fund right now in this current budget, which is unacceptable to me. And we're working to we're going to try to go back and move some money around for those types of things. Because if we can't pave, the very least we can do is fill the potholes. So we're working on that as it pertains to Spire and the other utilities. One significant area of improvement that we need to orchestrate, which is unfortunately not under the Board of Aldermen, but is to coordinate the utilities when they dig up the street. Spire needs to do it at the same time as Ameren and everybody else, and it is the city's responsibility. We charge those utilities a fee to repave, and we need to do the city needs to do a better job of it. That is not lost on us, and we will continue to advocate for those things. I can take one last, because they are asking that we leave at noon. Yes. Oh, we are? Oh, how is that? Oh, okay. So I want to thank you all. There should be another hearing.
For 1 hour. For what, 10 to 11 or 10 to 12?
Ryan, I'm not sure I understand this comment.
Because if we're over by an hour, that means we were only scheduled
Inez, we were scheduled from 10 to noon as far as I know. Okay, so I just want to be clear, that's as far as I know. If there was a problem with the venue, I'm unaware of that. I don't want to announce because I don't know anything about it. Is that, do you know, I don't know. Okay, with that, I want to thank you all again. I want to reiterate that we are continuing to hear public testimony. If you want to submit anything you were unable to say, please do via email or by letter or in person or any other way you can. With that, I will take a motion to adjourn the Budget and Public Employees Committee. I'm going to second that motion, seeing that I'm the only other member of the committee present. Hearing no objection, the Budget and Public Employees Committee hearing is now adjourned.